You own a home, your Shangri-La, and where memories are made. But owning a home is hard. And that's where we come in. This is the Absolute Home Service Podcast. We interview local businesses to show homeowners how improvements can be made, common issues, maintenance, and everything in between. Welcome to the Absolute Home Service Podcast. And now your hosts, James McCarter
Welcome back to another episode of the Absolute Home Service Podcast. Today, we've got Mr. Tim Williams with us. Tim is a licensed master electrician, so we're going to be picking his brain and coming up with some best practices and things to do and look out for with the electrical in your home. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, James. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of, how you got started and where you are, where you're at now?
I've been in the trade for almost 30 years now. Got started back when, I guess, dinosaurs were still roaming the earth and that type of thing. Everybody says I'm too old to go out and work with my hands anymore, so I use my brains now.
With age comes wisdom, Tim.
Exactly. Yeah, so we got started in this. It's kind of out of a whim. I was living in Virginia at the time, and originally from Kentucky, but had moved to the Virginia, and wanted to get back home and change jobs, change careers. So my mom and dad knew an electrician here in Kentucky, so I called him and we talked a little bit, and the rest is history.
That's awesome.
Doing residential, commercial, and industrial electrical, installations. I've been on the install side and estimating project manager side as well, so I know the business side of it too.
You've been kind of through all facets of the electrical world, huh?
Yes, that's correct.
What's your favorite part about the electrical world? What's kept you in it? What's kept that drive?
It's kind of been just the pride in seeing the job well done. I can drive by, and it's funny because when I do it, I'll drive by a building or something that I've wired or had my hands on, and I'll tell my family, like, yeah, I wired that.
I think that's a rule about what we do. It's like, hey, look, I did that. I worked on that. You might not be able to see it, but you got to let them know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's awesome. It's really really good to hear. And pride's a big thing. And I know at Absolute, company that we're both with, is one of the big major driving factors of what we do. Is taking pride in our work. Being very happy with what we do. So I've always told people, I want to, do a very good job for you. And the next time I see you is not, standing here in your house because something went wrong. Like, yes, we will fix our work if something does go wrong. But the next time I want to see you is also not me hiding from you when I see you at the grocery store or the ball field. I want to, hey, wave at you. That's my client. I've done work for you. And there's very, very good and powerful stuff comes from that.
Yeah.
So we'll jump into a couple of these questions that we've got here for you. I know you're itching to get after it. So, this show here is geared towards homeowners, giving them information, helping them make decisions when they're wanting to, do and perform projects in their home, et cetera. So we're going to tap into some of that knowledge and wisdom that I know you got stored, and see what we can't help them out, help them to avoid, anything that's unsafe, and then also let them know what they can do to help maintain their home. Right. So getting into it. So what are some of the most common electrical problems that homeowners face?
Well, especially some of the homes that are aging, well, even the new homes, a common practice for construction electricians is backwired receptacles. Mm-hmm. We see that a lot. We'll get a service call and they'll have half the room that's not working on receptacles, or it could be multiple rooms. And typically what those construction electricians will do is these receptacles have like a little hole in the back of them, and you just take and stick the wire in it, and it's got this little spring inside of there that holds it. Well, over time, with expansion and contraction and electricity generates heat. It causes that spring to kind of open up and wear out, and you have a loose connection. So you'll lose a lot of times. It's your neutral connection in there, and what happens with that is you may still have a hot conductor in there, but if you have electronics, it's bad news for your electronics because it can create a 240-volt series circuit and do some serious damage. So that's
So,
one of the most things.
so if that does happen, what do you call that? You said a backwired receptacle.
Yes,
So
that's right.
if that happens, what are some of the potential? How can someone know if that's happened or happening?
Well, if you say for instance, if you have something plugged into the outlet in the wall, TV, it could be a lamp, whatever, and all of a sudden the thing starts flickering, going off and
Mhm.
on. That's a sure sign that you've got an issue there. I've even seen some of them get to the point where they have load for multiple other outlets in the house, and they literally will melt the receptacle.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, so we've seen you'll have a burning plastic smell or electrical burn smell. It's pretty unique when you actually have an electrical burn because the odor it gives off is not like anything else.
Now, in an instance like that, is that something that would trip the breaker that particular device is tied to?
Not necessarily, unless you have a direct ground fault,
Hmm.
or if it's pulling too much current, it won't trip the breaker. It'll just sit there, and sometimes it'll work. Like when it cools back down, it'll tighten up and go back to working again, and then when you put a load on it and it heats back up, it'll open back up.
Gotcha. So that kind of takes me into something here real quick. So like in plumbing, for example, you've got like emergency shutoffs. In electrical, you've got your main breaker, right? Is that something that you think that every homeowner should know where it is and then how to turn that off?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. You definitely need to learn where your main breaker is in your panel in case you do have a hazard in your home. Something that happens that I mean you may not know the where that particular breaker is for that circuit, and you might need to go turn your whole main off in your house to prevent any problems.
So if you start seeing or smelling like that discoloration or like that burning, if you know where that particular breaker is, cut it off. If not, then hit the main and call in an electrician, call in a professional. Is that something you would suggest to do?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
you want to, for the safety of your family and safety of your home, I would highly recommend doing that, especially if you know that particular circuit, absolutely go turn it off and wait for an electrician to come.
Sure. Well, so Tim, that actually takes me into my next question. So, um, you know, in today's age, everything requires maintenance, no matter what it is. You have to get inspections, with your HVAC system, with your car, with your garage door, with yourself, your body, right? Everything requires some kind of maintenance. So, how often should a homeowner get their electrical system inspected or maintained?
Well, there's a company out there and they're called the Electrical Safety Foundation International.
Okay,
And these guys recommend a minimum of every 3 to 5 years.
every 3 to 5 years. Okay.
Yeah. If you have an older home though, so like it's something that was built back in 30s, 40s, 50s, I would recommend you doing it a minimum of every year because there's a lot that goes on inside of those walls and a lot that goes inside of your panels that you don't see. And especially if you have older wiring, aluminum wiring, tin copper wiring, you definitely want to make sure that you get that looked at because over a period of time, things can sneak up on you, and if you can catch them before they get too involved, you might save yourself a little bit of money.
Now, what is involved in some kind of inspection like that? Like how thorough would that be?
If you do a really thorough inspection, typically we do an 80-point inspection
Hmm.
on our homes, and it's from top to bottom. We check outlets, we check panels, we check the service. It needs to be something that's done very, very thorough with a qualified electrician that has been taken through the process, that truly understands how to inspect a home and what to look for.
So, knowing what to look for, glad you brought that up. So, what are some signs that a homeowner should know for when they need to call an electrician out?
Well, I guess the obvious is if you got arcing, sparking, and kind of odd odors going on in your house, you better get somebody there pretty quick.
Right.
So that's one definite thing. But if you start seeing if you start seeing small things happening, like light bulbs, if you put in incandescent bulbs and they burn out really quick, that could be a sign that you have a loose connection to your light fixture. It could be the light fixture itself failing. Especially fixtures that have been up 15, 20 years. If you put an incandescent bulb in there, those things generate a lot of heat. And a lot of times they'll take the insulation on the wires really brittle, and then insulation starts falling off. And then you could potentially have either a ground fault or you could have a fire. And I've even seen the entire lamp holder or the socket that actually holds the lamp completely fall apart when I take a lamp out of it.
That's interesting. I've never heard that before, that that it could be an electrical issue if your bulbs are burning out too quick. I've never heard that. That's a good little bit of knowledge right there. Until we're 10 minutes in, Tim, and you're already bringing the heat. So, speaking of lasting too short, what is like the lifespan of like the electrical components inside of a home?
It varies on the different components, but as far as the lifespan, and I'll explain a little bit about electrical theory here. So, and I'll try to keep it to where it's elementary and not maybe 10th grade level there, but
not 10th grade wisdom level.
Yeah, about that level. So I think everybody can handle that. But when you have electrons flowing in a wire, they create friction. They're bouncing off each other and they're constantly. So it creates heat. So heat is the enemy in any electrical device. So take, for instance, your electrical panel in your home. Your electrical panel depends on when it was manufactured, because our technology has come so far from when they originally started manufacturing electrical panels. But, if you have a panel that's, 40 years old or older, that's something that you really need to think about getting looked at and possibly replaced, because heat is the enemy in those devices. And they don't last forever. And the heat will cause the thermomagnetic strips inside of the breakers to fail. And also there's two little metal plates inside of those breakers, and wherever they make contact whenever it closes and opens. Well, if you turn the breaker off and on a lot, or even if you don't, there could be corrosion that happens in between those set of contacts, and it causes arcing in there. And it can cause your breakers to fail internally. Sometimes it causes the breakers not to trip. I mean, there is even some panels out there on the market, or I'll say in the homes already, by the name of Zensco, Stablock, Federal Pacific, or Bulldog, that have caused serious safety issues. All those companies are out of business now, and many of them went bankrupt because of the lawsuits that were filed against them because the breaker's not functioning properly. So, anywhere from 30, 40 years on those panels, is beyond the lifespan, honestly and truly. As far as an outdoor panel goes, you're looking at maybe, luckily, 20 years on the outdoor panel, just because of the moisture infiltration that happens with that on the outside. If you have an outdoor panel, if you go open the panel up, and you'll see a lot of discoloration on your breakers. If they look white on the front of them, you see mud or water stains, then that's something you need to think about getting replaced as well. So, that's a short, that's a fairly long lifespan, but you want to protect the panel, because it's really the heart of your home, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. So, you'd mentioned a couple of those different brands that were having some issues. Is there anything that can be done to those? So, for example, like, does it fall under like code or anything that says that we can't touch a specific type of panel or a certain age of a panel, that it has to be upgraded? What's the rules on that?
Well, the code says that anything that you place in a panel, the National Electric Code says it has to be listed by underwriters laboratories and tested. Those panels that I stated, there is currently no listed breakers that can be installed in those panels. So honestly, if you're doing any kind of adding additions onto your home, that is not possible to actually legally, per code, to do anything in those panels.
So a licensed electrician isn't touching that, is what you're saying?
You hit the nail on the head. Exactly. I'm not touching it.
Yep, I don't blame you. So, we've talked about what to look for and the dangers of what can happen. So, what are some tips that we can prevent electrical fires in the home? Because that's something that's actually very common, right?
Yeah, where it comes to aging homes, one thing that you can do is get your safety inspection. Call a company that get you an electrical safety inspection, and we do that. And it's a very, very, very minimal charge. We do that. If you call us out there to fix an outlet, we're going to inspect your entire home before we touch anything, because number one, we want to make sure that your home is safe for you to live in, and we uncover those things that you don't know about.
Right. It's no different than, and I've told people this, quite often, but there's absolutely no different than, if you go to the doctor, for just happened a couple days ago, had to go down to the ER with my little boy. He had a little cut on his head, so he had to get stitches. They didn't take it straight back and, start numbing the area and then put the stitches in. They checked his blood pressure, they checked his weight, they checked his height. They did a little mini inspection on him before they actually got started. To your point of that, you're going to uncover things, hopefully not, but you would uncover them, and you can potentially catch something much, much sooner before it becomes a big, huge problem, right?
Absolutely. That's why you want to do an inspection and get those things, taken care of. I mean, one thing that, a lot of homeowners, especially my mother's home, so to speak, her home was built in 1973. And I'm telling my age here because it was built the year I was born. And
that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, I know, right? But she's got outlets in her house where if you plug something into them, I mean, the cord falls right out.
Right.
It won't hold it. So those outlets, they've been in there a long time. Guess what? What's that?
That's a pest. I hate that problem. You go plug something in and it just like falls out, like you're charging your phone or doing something, and it just keeps falling out.
Yeah, and the only thing you can do about it is replace the outlet. But it would be a potential issue there too if you had a big load on it, like say you're using incandescent bulbs in your home still, which that's a totally different conversation we probably need to have. A 100-watt light bulb, it's going to pull a pretty good load on that outlet, so you're going to have some arcing going on there.
Right.
So potentially, you could have a fire issue.
Yeah. Well, and so that sounds like another tip. Make sure your outlets aren't loose.
Exactly.
So what are you've referenced a couple of terms, like you've said, fuse and breaker and different electrical terms and jargon. What is the difference between a circuit breaker and a fuse?
A fuse is probably it's one of the oldest devices that limit current. It's current flow. So they've been around a very long time. They were out before circuit breakers were even thought of. But it has a little metallic strip inside of it that has a predetermined level that it can handle with current flowing on it. When it exceeds that level, it automatically just burns up and dissolves, goes away. Right. And so a circuit breaker is kind of like a fuse in the fact that it will limit the amount of current that flows and trip when it gets over a certain level, but it's resettable. You don't have to replace it when it trips the first time. You can reset it multiple times, and they'll last. Circuit breakers themselves will last a long time, but they are again an electrical device, and they are carrying current, which also carries heat. And like we said before, heat is an enemy in an electrical device. So that's another thing that, as far as the life expectancy of a circuit breaker, is somewhere around 15, 20 years. At the max. I've seen them fail as early as 7 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when someone talks about a panel rejuvenation, which we refer that it's actually replacing all the breakers in your electrical panel to kind of give it a little extra life and boost it a little bit longer. That's something that is recommended to do.
Yeah, that's It's all very good information. So you said that was what, 15, 20 years is where you would start looking at something like that, right?
Yeah, definitely 15. Because if you and a good electrician can get in that panel and take a couple of the breakers out,
Hmm.
look at the busing underneath of it, and look how that breakers are actually mounting on the bus, and kind of look at the condition of them, and you can turn the breakers off and on and feel if they still snap properly, because they are a mechanical device and they have springs in them, and the springs wear out, the contacts wear out in them, so it's something definitely a homeowner needs to consider.
That's all very interesting stuff. I can see why it would take a very long time. Because correct me if I'm wrong, didn't the electrical of the trades has the longest time before you can get licensed? Is that correct?
Yes, if as far as it goes, trade the licensing goes in the trade, you to be permanently licensed as a journeyman electrician, you have to have 4 years of school and 4 years in the trade.
Right.
If you don't go to school, then it's 6 years as a journeyman or 8 years as a master.
Well, there's a lot to learn, and you've given a ton of information so far, and quite frankly, a lot of stuff that I've not heard, which is the whole purpose of doing this. We can shine some light, no pun intended, on this, so that people can be educated and understand like what's going on. So, what are a couple things on the homeowner side that we can do to save money on our electric bill?
The number one thing and the most simple thing that a homeowner can do is get rid of every incandescent lamp in their house and replace it with LED.
Now, earlier you said that's a whole other topic we had to talk about. So tell
Yeah.
me, get on your soapbox, Tim. Tell me what's up with these incandescents.
Incandescents are just they're like a heating element essentially that glows and gives off light. If
Hmm.
you just consider a 60-watt normal incandescent lamp, it uses 60 watts of power. And you can take the same lamp that puts the same amount of light out in an LED for 9 watts. So major difference there. You're talking about, what's that? I'm not best at math on the top of my head. What's that? 7 times, 8 times?
Right.
You know, so um, you're saving a whole lot of money right there simply by changing them out. And the other good thing about LED lamps, the manufacturers are stating that they last for 10 years.
Hmm.
I wouldn't hold my breath on that because they don't last that long in my house. I don't know whether they're basing their hours on that, but they do last a lot longer than a regular incandescent lamp. I'm saying usually I'm getting about anywhere from 3 to 5 years out of mine. And
You might
so,
have some backwired outlets in.
yeah, I might.
Your
That's pretty
lights ain't
basic.
lasting that long. So look, I'm
Yeah.
learning. Okay, I'm learning some stuff on here. What other things we can do? So we can change out some incandescents, toss in some LEDs. What else can we do? Stop the
So
meter.
what's that now?
Stop the meter. Just go out there. If you hold it, will that stop the charge?
No,
Mine's still
it'll still spin. I don't think you can hold it.
spinning. Well,
Uh,
it's worth a shot.
yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you another thing they can do. If folks have regular water heaters in their house,
Hmm.
there's a little timer that you can put on that water heater as well that will limit the amount of time it's on and the amount of electricity it's using, because most people aren't using hot water when they're sleeping,
Right.
and they're not using hot water when they're at home or at work during the day.
Right.
So you can set this timer to go off when you're not at home to turn your water heater off so it will not heat.
Wow.
So,
I did not know that. So is that an aftermarket, or is that something that's already on existing water heaters? How does that work?
well, usually when on new construction, the electricians don't put that on there.
Hmm.
So it's one thing that a homeowner finds out about, and they're like, oh, hey, I can do this and
Right.
save myself a little bit of money. So, they're not very expensive to put on. So in the amount of money that it pays back is probably going to be way beyond the cost of actually installing the timer on the water heater for you.
Right. Now, so with other appliances that utilize electricity, is there anything that can be done with any of them possibly that would save any kind of money on utilities, or what could help with that? Like for example, the water heater. That was a great one. That was awesome.
Yeah. Now there are some fancy breakers out now,
Hmm.
and also some fancy receptacles and switches. And you can control these things with Google. You can control them with Alexa. There's apps on your phones you can turn them off and on with. The breakers itself, they have some that you download an app, and if it works off your Wi-Fi, and if you go leave your coffee pot on when you leave the house, you can automatically open that phone app, punch a button on it, and turn the breaker off.
You can use Wi-Fi and control the breaker.
Yes.
That's interesting. I might be giving you a call, Tim.
Now, the only downside of it is you can't turn it back on with your phone. You have to physically walk back in your house into your panel and reset the breaker. And
Is
that's
that
for
a safety? Okay,
yeah. You beat me to it. That's a safety reason.
That was a genuine question. I wouldn't put two and two together, but typically everything is always for a safety reason. But I guess, if you're going to be powering up some device or something like that by way of breaker, you want to make sure that you're there just in case anything happens, even though it might shut back off, hopefully, but definitely want to be there. Go ahead.
The bad thing about that is that if, say, for somebody was home and they had turned that breaker off for whatever reason, and then you like, I'm gonna turn this thing back on, and they got their finger stuck in the outlet, or they're taking it out or whatever, and you turned it back on, well, there's an electric shock hazard.
Oh, that's very true. That's another perspective of looking at it. So speaking of, being able to put, Wi-Fi in and, putting this neat little device on the water heaters, can homeowners safely replace a light switch or outlet themselves, or should they consult an electrician?
I'm going to say, and this is my honest opinion, there's a reason that we go to school for 4 years and we got a license.
Right.
I would, as a homeowner, if you got some sort of mechanical skills and you feel safe doing it, I would say you could try it. But I'm going to lean on the side that you should call a qualified electrician to do that, because here's the downside of this. If you put that receptacle back in the wall, or say the switch or whatever, and you don't have those terminals tightened right, or you put it around the screw the wrong way, you'll wind up having a loose connection. It could arc inside of that wall, or you put it back inside the wall. And in residential applications, the ground wire is always bare. So you stick that receptacle back in that wall, and you happen to touch the ground to the hot conductor screw or the hot screw on the receptacle, you're going to have a nice little pop inside of that wall.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be able to reset that breaker until it's cleared. Now, what could happen with that is, well, I guess the bad thing of it is these other panels I was talking about, the breaker might not trip, and you have welding going on in your wall, and it causes a fire. So that's the other downside of that too. But as far as actually safely replacing them, I would say call a qualified electrician, save yourself a headache, save yourself from getting hurt, and save yourself from any safety hazards that could occur.
Now, I'll tell you another downside, and this is a funny story. It's happened to me. I would like to think that I can do the small things, like replacing a light switch or an outlet or something like that, right? But what happens when, and I'm going to blame it on those new construction electricians you were talking about that give us backfed outlets. They wired half of a room up on one breaker and the other half on another breaker. And it was only labeled as room 1, right? Mm-hmm. In the breaker box or in the panel box right here. And the other half of the room said it was the kitchen. It did not say it was over here. So I flipped that breaker off, and I go and I used my meter and I tested the outlet, and we're all good. I got one outlet, boom, got two outlets, boom, got to the third one and got lit up. Because it was on another breaker, 2 or 3 outlets on that one were. So
yeah,
it's unfortunate, but it can definitely happen, And I was being safe. I mean, I guess I should have tested all outlets, but I only tested one and didn't get any kind of power coming to it. So I assumed I was good. And you know what happens when you assume? You get shot.
Yes, exactly.
So earlier, we've talked about, some signs of the, needing to replace it. How can a homeowner, because you've mentioned, what'd you say, FPE panels and like Zinsco different types of outlets and whatnot. How can a homeowner tell if their electrical system is outdated and needs to be updated?
Well, if your home was built in the 40s, you definitely need to look at being updating if you've not done anything to it. And sometimes even in the 70s, there was a lot of aluminum wire that was used in the 70s.
Yep.
We've come up on a lot of homes that has aluminum wire in them, and sometimes the aluminum wire is okay, but the devices that people put in there is not necessarily rated for that wire. So what happens with that, when you get aluminum conductors on a device that's not rated for it, then you have contraction and expansion, loose connections, and you have a recipe for disaster in that wall. So we can rectify that, by putting some little devices in there that are rated for aluminum, or we can connect it with a special connector and use copper wire on the devices, because the aluminum rated devices are hard to get your hands on sometimes. But
Right.
that's one of the things that you really need to look for in those old houses is aluminum wire, because aluminum has a tendency, the smaller conductors have a tendency to cause fires. Now, aluminum service wires is typical of all construction, as long as it's terminated properly and torqued down to specifications and proper deoxidizing compound used on the aluminum conductors yourself. It's a very good system. You can save yourself a little bit of money on the conductors on the installation. But the small conductors, like the number 12 and number 14s, that's ran in those homes in the 70s, even the late 60s, is really a hazard. So you definitely need to look at that as far as upgrading. The other thing is, if you have a 60 amp service on your house or a 100 amp service, and you need to possibly you want to make an addition on your home, you've added more appliances, you need to upgrade your HVAC system. That's usually a common one. What we get called on is having to upgrade the service because it's not big enough for the HVAC system that the homeowner wants to put in the home. So that's another reason you need to look for upgrades too.
There's no way a 100 amp service is going to cut it today.
You are correct.
No way. Yeah, that's several years ago, looking at it, that was a lot. I mean, I've heard you all talking around the office. There's a lot of people upgrading to 400 amp services on houses now, just to because you got to think about it. Yeah, you can upgrade the HVAC system and be able to drop some of the required power and breaker size, but with all the new devices and the car chargers, all the stuff that they're having, it's just requiring more and more and more nowadays. Especially, are you all seeing any kind of uptick with adding breakers or circuits in for people, speaking of HVAC or water heaters, that have gas or propane systems that are converting over to electric?
Yes, we've seen a lot of that, especially with HVAC. It's been kind of crazy, but the one good thing about the HVAC systems too is you can save a little bit on them versus the old HVAC systems that had the huge heat strips in them. The new efficiencies with the new systems with the DC inverters are extremely efficient, so that can save you a lot of money on your power bill and also help your home be more comfortable. And of course, they are changing from gas water heaters to electric, and some people want the InstaHeats.
Right.
And if you put an InstaHeat water heater in, it's 24 kW a lot of times, so that's like two 60 amp circuits it requires.
Right. That's drawing a lot of power, but hey, that's what's going to get you the convenience, right? And that's that's what we're all about. So, you've got Tim, you've talked about some of the common things to look for, what to watch out for, when to call somebody. One thing that we haven't talked about is surge protection or grounding. So, with grounding or surge protector, what is the benefits of installing a surge protector?
Well, without grounding, we'll start with grounding there real quick, because without grounding, your surge protector is not going to do the best possible job for you. Grounding is very important. So, I mean, a lot of homes that are older, because we're talking about older homes here,
Mm-hmm.
back in the early days, a lot of times electricians used a piece of rigid conduit because that's all they had, and they just smashed the bottom of the rigid conduit and drove it into the ground. Well, rigid conduit is galvanized steel, and what happens after 20 years on galvanized steel?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, there's nothing left of it. It's rusted.
Right.
So now you've just lost your grounding system for your home.
Right.
So yeah, that's one big thing that you need to check. As you think about surge protection, it's very important to have that grounding system because you got to have somewhere for that stray voltage and lightning strikes to dissipate,
Right.
and that's what your grounding is for. Now, surge protection, if let's talk about utility companies, I guess, while we're talking about surge protection. These guys don't care whether you get a surge or not. They promise you plus or minus 10% in your home, which your voltage could fluctuate from 110 volts all the way up to 125 volts. And I've seen it even higher than that, which if it gets higher than that, then you've got some real issues because you're going to start burning up appliances and devices.
Right.
Now, surge protection will stop those surges. What happens with it is if you get a surge, a voltage surge or a voltage spike, it will actually clamp that voltage down and dump it back on the ground, the neutral conductor, and it will keep it off your system. Now, the key is having it in your panel. You got to have it at your source because if it gets all the way through your house to your device, then you got opportunities to have further damage before it gets there.
Right.
So there's a lot of surge suppressors out there too that are on the market. A lot of people think the ones that they plug in for their computers, or their VCRs, TVs, or whatever, and those are a good second stop if the first one doesn't catch it at the panel. But the ones that I'm really familiar with they're made by Eaton, and Eaton actually warranties these things for life. And they also, if you have a surge and it fries any of your equipment in your home, they will give you $75,000 to replace that equipment or up to it, for the damage that the surge actually did. So these manufacturers really believe in their equipment, and I don't think that they would make that claim lightly if they pretty much put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, that's a bold claim. So these surge protectors that you're putting inside of the panel, do you have to have one surge protector for the panel, or is it one surge protector for every breaker in that panel?
It's just one for the panel.
So just one. Okay.
Yeah. So you typically they work off a 2-pole 50 amp breaker.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have the breaker space to snap it in there. You snap your breaker in, and the surge protector typically mounts outside of the panel. And then it's you keep the wire as short as you possibly can because you want it to dump that surge as quickly as possible back onto the grounding system.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, it's even more interesting. One of my next questions that I've got here is actually a pretty good one. I want to hear what you have to say. What are some of misconceptions? What are common misconceptions about electricity that homeowners have?
That it's safe.
Definitely not safe.
No, electricity is probably one of the least safe things that you can use in your home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as long as your wiring and everything is installed correctly and properly, you can contain it. But if it's not been installed, then it's not good.
Right.
The other thing is the National Electric Code doesn't matter. If I'm a homeowner, then I don't care about code. I own this house. I'm going to fix it however I want to, type thing. And
right.
Most of the stuff written in the National Electric Code is written in blood, so to speak. Right. Somebody got hurt because it's in there. So
I'm glad you brought that up. So a homeowner, A lot of times it is their home. They do what they want. They don't have to follow code, et cetera, et cetera. They're not getting inspections because they're not required to, right? Until they sell the home. But what, how can a homeowner follow a code that they're unaware of?
Well, it's very difficult to do that. Now, if I would say that if you have any doubts about what you're doing, you need to call a licensed electrician.
That's probably a safe bet. So what other misconceptions you got? I know you've probably heard plenty of them.
Well, the if a homeowner is pulling a permit themselves, then they can hire somebody else to do it, like their Uncle Bob.
Right.
That is actually against the law in Kentucky.
Really?
Yeah. So the homeowner actually has to use their hands to do the work. They can't hire their Uncle Bob to come do it, because even if he is a licensed electrician, the state of Kentucky can actually fine him or pull his license for not actually pulling the permit on the home.
Right.
So
they
it's
got some rules in place for sure. I mean, like you said, it's best to just always play it safe and make sure you're following the rule book. Because electricity, I mean, HVAC can be dangerous. Plumbing can be dangerous. Garage doors can be dangerous. But realistically, it's I'm not too scared if my water heater stops working.
yeah.
I'm not discounting any of the trades at all, but electricity out of all of them is the one that I have always been the most cautious of, and reluctantly don't even want to touch it, just because the bad experiences and stuff that I have. If I'm replacing a water heater and it dumps water all over me, or if I'm trying to dig up a line and get unwanted dirty water on me, let's just call it that. We'll be nice. It's nasty, but I don't have to worry about my life, in that instance. I know there's dangers in every single job, but electrical, there's just something about it. It always just, there have been times where you can tell me that panel is dead. You can hold your hands on it, stick your hands in there and tell me it's dead. And I don't even want to mess with it. I don't even want to get near it. It's scary stuff,
Yeah. Once you have bad experience, it'll stick with you forever.
Yeah, that is a fact. So you did talk earlier about 60 and 100 amp panels and wanting to have additions and stuff like that. And we are aware that a 100 amp panel will not cover realistically anything, let alone addition. But how can a homeowner, so if they're wanting to add on new appliances, electronics, or additions or anything, how can they tell if their panel is going to be able to handle what they're going to be adding?
The first thing to do is probably just go open your panel door up and see what size the main breaker is, and see if you got a 100 amp panel or 200 amp panel. The other thing is, if you're adding new appliances or new HVAC systems or anything like that, you're going to have to calculate the load that you're putting in there and calculate the load that's on your panel.
Right.
Now, unless you're a qualified licensed electrician, it's probably not very likely that you know what to actually do the calculations for.
Right.
So you probably want to call someone to come take a look at that for you and say, hey, can I add this, or can I do this? Can I do that? Or do I need to upgrade my service? Right.
Is this going to be safe, or is this even possible? So speaking of load calculations, is something I learned recently from you. You have to measure the home to determine what size and how much you're going to need in that home, right? Even all the way down to lighting.
Yes.
So what else do you have to run a load calculation on? So for example, what is the best way I can do to prepare for a power outage?
Okay, so preparing for power outages. The first thing you need to do is go make sure you got some candles and flashlights.
Check and check. Got it.
So got to make sure you got that. So, and then the other thing is make sure you got a little bit of water and all that kind of your bare necessities sitting around there. Because if it was like the ice storm that we had back several years ago, we were without power out here where I live for almost 10 days.
Mm.
So it was a bit daunting.
Right.
But the other options that you have is you better make sure that you got some ice around if it's warm. So you're gonna have to put all your stuff outside
Mm-hmm.
or take it out of your refrigerator, keep it cold or whatnot. If it's wintertime, it's no big deal if your power goes out for your food. You just
Right.
take it, sit it out on a porch, throw it in a cooler. You know,
Saving it all.
but if it's the summertime, then you got to think about all the other stuff. Or you could just be real simple about it and get yourself set up with a portable generator inlet with a select circuit panel, or you can get a home standby generator.
Right.
And as long as you got, well, I mean, it doesn't really matter if you have propane or natural gas, you can always get it put in.
Right.
And you can calculate the loads or decide what specific things you're going to run in your house while your power's out, and while your neighbors are in the dark, you can be sitting over there watching, with your feet up, watching TV or what's the show now? Is it Yellowstone that everybody likes?
I have not gotten on that bandwagon, Tim.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't watch it, but that's,
I hear enough about it.
Yeah.
I tell you, it's bad when people start dressing up like the people in the show. That's when it just gets too deep for me. I'm good for watching, a show here and there, but I don't ever get that involved into it. So, and you know all too well that if your power goes out, your neighbors aren't going to be sitting over there in the dark. They're going to be sitting right beside you on your couch. Hey, Tim, I heard you have a generator. I'm going to come over here while you got some lights so we can sit here and talk.
Oh, yeah, exactly. They're going to say, hey,
start a fight with the wife. I got kicked out, Tim. Can I come hang out with you?
Yeah, hey, man, I got a 12 pack. I'm bringing them over. We're going to sit and watch TV.
Yeah, that is perfect. Well, Tim, we're getting close to wrapping up, but I've got one other question that I wanted to ask, because this just comes down to safety, and I've heard this a couple of times, and I've heard some horror stories about it. But what are some best practices on using like extension cords in the home?
Don't.
Why?
I mean, plain and simple, don't, if you can prevent it.
Right.
So with extension cords, there's all shapes and sizes.
Mm-hmm.
And typically what the homeowner will buy will be the little bitty brown extension cords that are good for like 5 amps, and they will plug it into the wall and they'll plug their space heater into it.
Yep.
And next thing you know, that cord is really hot and you start smelling this weird plastic smell, and your cord is melted to your floor or your carpet. So extension cords are really, they're designed to be a temporary thing. So for like your Christmas tree, your Christmas lights,
right?
They're not designed to be any kind of permanent fix,
right?
So if you need to use an extension cord, then you probably need to extend a circuit or add a new circuit in your home to be safe.
Now, parting words of wisdom, any knowledge. What's some best practices that we can do or avoid in our home?
Well, we just covered the one with extension cords.
Stop using extension cords. Noted. Yeah. So this little brown cord back here that I got, I'm gonna throw it away.
Yeah, get rid of that thing.
I'm just kidding. I learned from you, Tim.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to save energy, obviously turn the lights off when you leave. If you don't want to do that, call us and we'll put some motion detectors in for you. So they'll go off when you walk out. Because I know folks' kids, if they were like mine, every light in the house is always on. And, they never turn anything off. And you put that motion sensor in there and you can set it for 5 minutes to go off after the motion, and it's gone. It's off. So you're saving energy that way to do that. As far as other best practices, don't throw a toaster in the bathtub unless it's plugged into a GFI.
Oh, that's solid advice.
So, always make sure that if you are using devices around water, any kind of appliances, that it is on a GFI receptacle. That's the ones that's got the little push buttons on it that sometimes go bad and won't reset. So that's one definite thing. If you don't have them in your house, then you need them, because that is protection for the homeowner.
Right.
You got to get those in there,
Right.
especially in the kitchen, because if Mama's cooking something and she drops it in the sink, you don't want her to get fried on Friday night.
That is very true. That is very true. So, Tim, we greatly appreciate you, taking time out of your day to come on here and share your knowledge and wisdom with us, and going over, best practices, what to look for, what to avoid, and just overall being safe, especially when it comes to electrical. So we'll definitely make sure we get this information put out there. And as always, if anybody needs anything or needs tune-ups or inspections, we'll make sure that we're getting our information put out there. We'll put it in the link with this video, and we greatly appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thanks, James.